in terms of criminalizing coercive control, I take the same position as my colleagues here on this call about the dangers of that. Because in family law, we've certainly seen how family violence terms get used against women. The courts talk a lot about high conflict. It's not family violence. The court uses alienation versus family violence. The court can't really separate. Well, they try to separate sort of, well, is this coercive control or is it just really bad behavior? Somebody's being a bit of an asshole. So it's okay. It's also very situational. It's time limited. And so courts here aren't very good yet at really understanding the impact of coercive control. And I think one of the dangers of just using the word is that word just has no meaning. And it's really not the term coercive control that's important. It's really looking deep down to what kinds of behaviors are happening, what kind of conduct is happening, and what is the impact then on the person who is at the brunt end of that coercive control. And so I look towards, I started writing this whole list of what behaviors could be coercively controlling. And a lot of it, you also say, well, it's not necessarily, do we actually need a pattern? Because oftentimes you're not going to actually see a quote pattern as in this particular act is going to continue on and going. It's just, you're going to see a whole bunch of different acts, a whole bunch of different things. And a particular act on their own, sending a few, nasty emails, calling somebody psychotic, is that enough to be coercively controlling? No. You look at the whole, that is ongoing. And then you look at the impact on the woman who's experiencing this. And I always find it's really important because, courts are very much about being objective, right? Being the reasonable man standing outside. And when you do that, most of what you read in the court cases about actions, you'd be like, yeah, well, he's a bit of a jerk. So what, and it's not considered control. Whereas I'm not sitting in that place of that woman who's experiencing this. So, I have a client who's he calls her psychotic throughout. And to me, it's like, oh, what an asshole, but I don't know the impact I do know the impact on her. And we have to stand in that place. Whereas a court, might minimize and say, oh, so he called her crazy. He thinks that, she's a danger to the child. Well, that's legitimate for him to say. Well, it's not. So anyway, I'm sort of rambling a bit about, there's just a lot we have to unpack to make sure that we can really get the courts to understand how these types of behaviors impact on women and how then it should affect perhaps the parenting regimes. And the courts don't. The guy can be the worst of the worst. We know this. Men who've been convicted of murder, whatever, they can still see their kids. It's still about the best interest of the kids. It doesn't preclude that. And so we're very far away from really having a good understanding and sensibility of how coercive control plays out in parenting issues, particularly, or in family law in general, because it can come into property issues, it can come into spousal support, and it can come into child support.